Hello, once again, and welcome back for another episode of the Middle Age Gaming 2020's The Game Show.
Before we begin, just a heads up, today's format is a little bit different from our standard fare.
That is correct. Normally, we pick three separate titles, each within a common theme, but today we're going to do our first full on review episode.
And as you may have guessed, if you've been watching our streams or by the title, we will be reviewing both Godfall and Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Just a quick disclaimer these games released just last week, so we haven't had a lot of time to really see them through to fruition.
Not even close. But that is not such a bad thing because, unlike quote unquote professional critics, we will be factoring in the value of your time in these reviews.
And with that, Adam, would you like to give us your review on Assassin's Creed Valhalla?
Probably not wise given my penchant for long winded assessments, but I'll try to keep things to a reasonable review this time. All right, so as Crian said, I have been playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, or Valhalla. I guess it depends on if you're American or Viking. It is published by Ubisoft. It is the most recent entry in the Assassin's Creed franchise. It released on November 12th, 2020, which was just last week, and it is on PlayStation, PS. How am I saying? It's on PS4 and 5. It's on the Xbox One and the Xbox X Series, and it is also available on PC. So this is kind of interesting because if you've played the really old school Assassin's Creed, Assassin's Creed 1, Assassin's Creed 2, especially Brotherhood, those ones really focused on stealth. That was the big thing. And combat wasn't really something you wanted to engage in. So it was more of a puzzle game than anything because you wanted to figure out how to get in and out and kill these people and whatnot. Now, in starting with, I guess to an extent, I didn't really play 3, but starting with around, I guess, Black Flag, they really started kind of pushing into more of this kind of action-oriented style game, especially with Origins. Starting with Origins, it was really kind of action-oriented. You still had your assassinations and stealth was still a factor, but they really kind of leaned into this, you're a warrior as much as you are an assassin. And with this game, it's kind of interesting because it looks like they're kind of going back a little bit to their roots. Now, it's still very action oriented, so you can still run in, kill everybody. You're a Viking, so obviously combat's going to be a very important part of your day-to-day life. One of the biggest features in the game is raids, where you can come into a town and just sail up to the coast, and then you have everybody in your longboat jumps out, and your entire little squad or army or whatever gets out, and they're all fighting together. So there's definitely that action aspect of it, but at the same time, they seem to be kind of leaning back towards allowing you to play more stealthily if you want to. One example of this is in the menus, they have an assassination option. And in previous games, based on kind of the, what do you call it, the outer story or the framing device of Assassin's Creed was that you are not actually playing as an assassin. You're playing as a person reliving genetic memories of their ancestors who was an assassin. And basically, because of that, it creates this kind of interesting mechanic where in normal games you have a life bar, and if you lose too much life, then you die. In this one, what it is when you fight, if you die or you take damage, what's happening is your reliving of these memories is desynchronizing with the way your ancestor did it because they were this professional assassin. They didn't screw up. So if you're screwing up, the memories are desynchronizing, and if they desynchronize too much, then the simulation fails. And so that's kind of an interesting mechanic that puts a new spin on like life bars and that sort of thing. But because of that, what they would do is they would also kind of gate off parts of the world. So they would say, okay, well, your ancestor was only in this part of the city on that day at that time. So if you try to leave that part of the simulation, it would basically stop you and say, well, we don't have data for that because your ancestor was never there. And this kind of solved kind of the problems that a lot of games use with invisible walls and locking you out of going to certain areas too early. The way they do it in Fallout is they'll ramp up the radiation really high. So if you tried to go out there, you would just basically die from radiation. Other games basically just give you a little warning and it says, oh, you can't go out this far. You can't leave the area, and it might even just teleport you back to somewhere. But this would do that, where it would say, oh, you can't go there because it's not part of the memory. Now, in Valhalla and the last few games, these are open world games, so they really want you to go everywhere. Excuse me. So that wasn't really a problem, to say you can't go there. They were like, okay, go wherever you want. But the way that they regulate you is, instead, now enemies have levels. In previous games, they did not have levels. Now they do. So basically, if you follow the main story path, enemies should be around your level. Whereas if you go off the beaten path and go to areas you really shouldn't be visiting quite yet, enemies are going to be a higher level, and you're going to have a much, much harder time dealing with that. So you might be more encouraged to come back and do that later. Now, because of this, stronger enemies, if you try to assassinate them, basically it won't assassinate them, it'll just do critical damage, which is something that we also saw in Ghost of Tsushima, where if you were fighting really, really strong characters, you couldn't assassinate them right out unless their life was low. You would just do critical damage. But there is an option that what you can do is you can turn it on, and it makes it so that every assassination is a successful assassination. So if you want to go back to that traditional, I can just assassinate guys, it doesn't matter about levels, I don't have to worry about that sort of thing, you actually have the option to turn that on. So this is kind of interesting, because a lot of the old school Assassin's Creed fans didn't really like the new focus on combat. Obviously, a lot of people do like that because that's in style right now, and that's kind of the thing. So this kind of, just that one option toggle really gives people an option to play kind of in the classical way or kind of the new school way. And so because of that, I think it's really a good kind of compromise to appeal to a broader audience. So older players can still get that feeling of, I'm an assassin and I run in and I just, from the shadows gut everybody in a base. So that's actually really cool. Exploration is also different here. If you played the older Assassin's Creed games, and I'm going to be comparing this a lot to Ghost of Tsushima, because that's the game I just played, and they have a lot of similarities, but they are so very different. But I'll get into that later. But in the older Assassin's Creed games, and in Ghost of Tsushima, Horizon Zero Dawn did this as well. You have areas that you know where you can climb and where you can't climb. In Ghost of Tsushima, they kind of had these rocks that were stained. In Horizon Zero Dawn, people would paint the rocks where you could climb, basically. So somebody had gone along and basically shown everybody in the world, okay, these are the safe paths. Assassin's Creed kind of did the same thing, where you might have like a wooden bar or something hanging on the side of a building, so you know which side of the building you can scale on. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, however, you can scale basically everything. So if there's a cliff, you can just climb straight up the cliff. And if you're watching my video, I have a segment on there where you can see just scaling a straight up cliff. So you can really go anywhere. This is kind of a like Breath of the Wild in a way. However, you don't have a stamina bar, so you can really go anywhere you want. There's basically no limitations in the world until you hit the edge of the world. And unlike a game like, say, Skyrim, where I'm here, there's a big mountain, I have to work my way around the mountain. No, you can definitely go over the mountain. So that's really, really cool from an exploration point, because playing, say, Ghost of Tsushima, there were parts where I would be like, okay, I'm up here, and I can see there's a guy way down below me, and it's too far for me to jump, and I have to figure out a way down. Or I'd be low somewhere, and I know a guy's way up there, and I have to figure out a way up. And at times that was definitely designed so that you couldn't go to areas you're not supposed to access yet. But at the same time, sometimes it could be really, really annoying, because if you know that there's like a fight that I need to get to up there, and you don't know how to get up there, you have to run a long way around, and it can take a long while to figure it out. Here, you can just beeline it wherever you want to go. So that's really, really cool. Another thing that I really like is, and I mentioned this on my review of Ghost of Tsushima again, they do have a large variety of weapons. So you can get axes, you can get hammers, you can get shields, you get your bow. I have not gotten a sword yet. However, I have gotten a dagger. They have two-handed weapons, and they have one-handed weapons. And each weapon kind of works a little differently. So, for instance, with the with the axe, you're basically just swinging. It's relatively fast. You know, it hits relatively hard. Uh, so it's kind of your standard weapon, what a sword would normally be in most games. If you get the dagger is really, really fast, but it doesn't do as much damage. The hammer is the opposite, where it does a lot of damage, but it's really slow. It's also really good for knocking away shields. And you can equip a weapon in each hand. So you could have, say, an axe in your right hand and a shield in your left, or vice versa. So basically, you have your primary weapon in your right, your secondary weapon in your left, and depending on how you combine the weapons, it's going to change the way you fight. And they also do something where if you have two of the same type of weapon, then you get another set of kind of special attacks. So, for example, the hammer, if you have the hammer in your left hand, it just kind of like slams it on the ground really, really hard if you have a non hammer in your main hand. If you have an axe in your offhand, she would just kind of do this quick kind of like slash or chop kind of thing. But if you have an axe in each hand, then she does this kind of two-handed like slam, 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 slam. So you can do a lot of damage with it. So it does add a little bit of variety in the fighting. Now, that said, it's not very deep. It's basically just heavy attack and light attack. And that way, it actually feels a lot like the combat in The Witcher, where it doesn't really, like, for instance, in Ghost of Tsushima, there's a lot of back and forth. There's parrying, there's blocking, there's stance changes, and because your stance changes, you have access to different kinds of special attacks and that sort of thing. So the combat felt really, really deep. In this one, the combat does feel very, very shallow, and that it's basically just a heavy attack and a light attack and an offhand attack. That's basically all you have. Now, you can parry if you offhand attack at the same time to deflect their attack. But other than that, it's really just kind of, heavy, light. And they also, here too, they have a stamina bar for your attack. So when you do a heavy attack, that drains stamina. If you do a light attack and you miss, that drains stamina. If you do a light attack and you hit, that'll regenerate stamina. So they kind of have this stamina bar going back and forth. It's not just a continuous kind of battle. And because of that, you might find yourself, engaging a guy, running away, waiting for your stamina to come back up, re-engaging the guy, running away, waiting for your stamina to come back up, which was not something in Ghost of Tsushima where you were basically constantly in battle. So I would say that it's kind of interesting because it is slightly more stealth oriented than Ghost of Tsushima. However, at the same time, it's not a lot more stealth oriented. It's also less combat oriented. So I would say overall, I think I enjoyed the kind of combat mechanics or the engagement mechanics of Ghost of Tsushima a little bit better. However, this one does have a lot of mini games in it, which Ghost of Tsushima did not really have. So far, I've unlocked a drink. You'll see him here at some point in my video. I don't know where we are in it right now, but at one point in the video, you'll see there's a drinking game. So basically, when you visit different towns, you can drink them under the table. So you're just mashing a button to get there's the little thing comes in, and if you hit the button at the right time, you'll chug alcohol from your horn. After you usually do about, I think, 3 rounds of it. After the first round, you start to get a bit drunk, so your character will start to stumble, and you kind of have to hit the arrow to get them upright again. So that's kind of an interesting thing. They have a dice game, which kind of reminds me a little bit of Gwent. It's not like Gwent in the way it plays at all, but just kind of the idea that there's this in-game game, and this is a full-on game. So basically what you do is you start off with a certain number of hit points, which are represented by little rocks. You roll dice. You can get either an axe, a helmet, an arrow, a shield, or a hand, I think. And so then occasionally some of the dice will have like a little yellow border on them. The borders give you a resource which you can use to pull down favors from the gods. So you get these little god totems, and you can use those and expend those for favors. And the favors could be something like eliminate helmets on the enemy team, or do this much damage at the end of the turn. And then basically it's just kind of a mixing and matching of dice. So what you do is you throw the dice, you choose which dice you want to keep, and then you would throw the dice again, choose which ones you want to keep, and then throw it a third time, and then you keep whatever's left. And then it kind of does this rock, paper, scissors thing where you have arrows. Arrows are counted by shields. So if they have a shield, it blocks the arrow. If they don't have a shield, the arrow would hit, do 1 damage. You have the axes, which are blocked by helmets. If they don't have helmets, the axe will do 1 damage. And then the hand will steal some of that resource that you can use for special attacks. It'll steal that. So it's kind of it's not super deep, but it is kind of fun. But it can also be, depending on how quickly you're playing, it can kind of be a time sink. Not as much as Gwent was, but and what else is also really great here is after you defeat somebody for the first time, it'll mark them on the map as having been beaten. So you know which people you've defeated and which people you didn't, which is really great because if you were playing The Witcher 3 and you were playing Gwent, it did not indicate who you had played before. And if you wanted to go through and collect all the cards for that trophy, that was, if you weren't doing that from the get-go, that was a huge pain. And that is why I never got the trophy in that game. And then the other mini game I've gotten to so far is called Flighting, which is basically a rap battle in a way. So it's a poetry battle. So basically what'll happen is the guy will give you something. They'll give you 3 options and there's a little timer and you have to choose one of the 3 options and you have to match the cadence, you have to match the rhyme, and you have to kind of counter their statement. So if they say something to insult you, then you would want to try to flip that insult on them. Or if they say something where they're kind of bragging, you could kind of take them down a notch. So it's kind of interesting. It so far hasn't been terribly hard. I wonder if it'll get a little bit harder as the game goes on. Maybe some of those bars will go down faster. But yeah, it's kind of a nice touch, but it's kind of a weird mini game because yeah, there's a definite way to win. It's not like a game; it's more like a challenge. So, but I mean, it's still kind of fun. They also do what's different from some previous Assassin's Creed games is they have the RPG tree mechanics. So now you can definitely customize your character quite a bit more. You can choose to go a little more stealthy or be a little more combat oriented or be a little more ranged oriented. So you can customize your character there a little bit. And what also is interesting is that you can respec at will. So for instance, in Ghost of Tsushima, you were basically just unlocking things. In this one, it's a full tree. So you are still unlocking things, but you can kind of go out and there's tons and tons of things you can unlock. And because of that, they allow you to respec at any time. So that's kind of cool where you can go kind of in one direction, try a stealth approach. And if you're like, I feel like being a little more combat oriented, you can switch it back, go back into combat oriented. So that's kind of a cool little thing. It's also interesting because it has multiple maps. It's not just one big map. You start off in the starting area. I haven't accessed it yet, but later on I'm going to go to England, and that's going to be another area to unlock. And then I've heard that you can also visit places like the New World, so you are going to visit North America. However, those are not so much maps as they are kind of little mini levels, so it's a little bit different there. But the map is fairly large, and given your ability to traverse everything, it does make exploration kind of fun. And it also feels like I'm moving around the map quite a bit faster than I did in Ghost of Tsushima. As in, I can see something on the map. It's far away, but I feel like, and it'll say like 900 meters away or 1.5 kilometers away. But I feel like I can span that distance in a much shorter time than it took me to do what was similarly, said to be a similar distance in Ghost of Tsushima. Definitely the horse feels a lot faster as well. Speaking of the horse, the controls are pretty good, but it does remind me a lot of The Witcher because what is kind of a neat little feature is if you want to go somewhere, if you hold down square, your horse will run along the road, and it follows the road so much better than it did in Witcher. The horse was terrible in Witcher. This one will follow the road. It will stick to the road, and then you can hit triangle, and the horse will actually take you to your next story point. So if you need to go somewhere, you can just kind of hold down square, hold down triangle, or whatever those respective buttons are the Xbox, put down the controller, sit back, and your horse will run all the way to where you need to go for your next quest. So that's kind of a nice little feature there. Your boats will do the same. The ships will do the same thing. If you set sail, you can set it to follow the coast. And then after you set it to follow the coast, you can set it to set port for your destination, and it will take you straight there. So that can definitely be a huge thing. That said, I did have a little bit of problems with the boat last night, where I sailed into a little inlet, and it was like a teenager trying to parallel park. Getting back out of that thing was just getting hung up on every little rock, so that was kind of a pain. And of course, sea shanties have returned, so I really enjoyed those in Black Flag. So the fact that sea shanties have returned, that makes me happy. You don't have to listen to them; you can turn them off if you want to. But I enjoyed my sea shanties, so for me, that's a definite plus. Now, there are some definite downsides as well. I've had some problem with textures not loading properly, specifically on tattoos, where I go into the tattoo menu. So you can customize your character, you can customize your tattoos, you can customize your hairstyle, and they just came out blurry and low resolution, and it didn't look that good. Now, I had some ones on the arm that kind of, the way it was designed, it looked like they may have been designed to be faded tattoos. So that one I wasn't quite sure. But there was this one where it looked like it was supposed to be a tattoo that looked like kind of like they tattooed your muscles on the outside of your abs. And that one just came out as a pixelated mess. It was awful. I think I even have the picture and the video of it there. But yeah, some of the textures, especially on tattoos, not mapping very well. In the dialogue, the faces are kind of animated, but they're not super animated. So especially if you've played older Assassin's Creeds like Unity, where they used motion capture, that's not going to look as good there. The dialogue can feel a little flat. Okay, I mean everybody's kind of doing that. I'm a Viking. Everything I say is hoarse and rough, and I don't emote very well. So there is kind of, it does feel a little bit flat on that end sometimes. I've been playing as the female Eivor, and the reason I did that is because you have three options. You can play as the female, you can play as the male, or you can let the animus decide. So I haven't gotten to the point where it tells me why, but there's something where there is a corruption in the memory where it is unsure if I should be male or female. And because of that, it has two data streams. And so you can let the animus decide, and it'll go through and it'll basically decide when you're female Eivor, when that's the canon, and when you're male Eivor, when that's the canon. So I haven't gotten to the mystery of why that is yet, but that is there. But for the beginning, so far I've been playing as female Eivor. I've heard that the male the voice acting is better, but obviously I haven't played that part, so I don't know. There is some clipping. I had a case where I was talking to a person and their jacket was like halfway through their face. So we are getting kind of the class Ubisoft. It's not quite as bad as those old what was it, Unity memes where somebody's head didn't generate except for the eyes and the teeth.
Oh no.
But yeah, you remember that one, the
I've seen
meme?
that.
Yeah, it's not that bad. So thankfully, I haven't seen anything like that. The controls are a bit floaty too. It kind of bothers me, especially coming from something like Ghost of Tsushima, which had very, very tight controls. These do feel a little bit floaty, not quite as much as The Witcher felt starting off, but it does make it difficult, which kind of gets me. It bugs me to no end. There's no jump in this game. You'd think in a game where you're an assassin, there's no jump. And now that I think about it, I don't think there was a jump in Black Flag either, but my brain decided to forget that fact. But yeah, there's no jump, so you just have to hold down X, and then when you come up to a wall or something, they'll kind of vault over it or vault into it. And because of that, the only way to do certain things is you basically have to hold X, which is kind of the climb button. And sometimes it can make things very difficult. Like there were parts where I would be at the side of a building and I would be in the middle of a fight and there'd be an open window and I want to go for the open window. So I'm running at it, I'm holding X, and I just kind of I'm running straight at the window and I kind of jump at an angle and grab, and now I'm hanging on the wall next to the window. And I'm like, no, I want to go in the window. So I hold left, and then instead of climbing in the window, it jumps to the other side of the window and then it's still clinging onto the wall. And I'm like, no. So then I have to drop off the wall and then go straight at the window again. And then it kind of thinks I want to climb. And then I have to do this 3 or 4 times. And then finally, eventually, they figure out, oh, you're trying to go through the window. And then I go through the window. So because of that, sometimes the controls aren't quite clear. Like it does feel kind of, it's not glitchy, but it feels glitchy because it is doing what it's supposed to do, but it's assuming I want to do something I didn't actually want to do. And because of that, it's guiding me to that and I'm like, no, I want to do this. And so the controls can be a little bit hard in that sense. Another example was I was chasing after, they have these little pieces of paper. You can chase after them, and if you can collect them and catch them, then you can get a new tattoo. I was chasing one of those, and there was a part where I was kind of walking on a rope, and there's a pole. So it kind of hits the pole and then runs off in a different direction. And I wanted to continue running along the rope, and instead I hit the pole and I climb up the pole, and the paper just keeps running off. And I'm like, no. And then I had to climb back down the pole and then go run, and so because of things like that, it can be a little bit. I do feel like I do have to fight the controls from time to time, which was not an issue in Ghost of Tsushima. But again, that's because they had very distinct. This is where you can climb. This is where you cannot climb. Whereas in Assassin's Creed, you can climb anywhere you want. So it definitely has its benefits, but there's a trade-off there. So getting around can be a bit hit or miss. So those are the downsides for me. Now, and then things that aren't really good sides or downsides that I would go into are exploration. You can make it easy or hard. This is kind of an interesting thing. They have an option, and you can set exploration. You can set your exploration level to 3 different levels. And basically what those do is it will tell you where everything is on the map. It will only tell you where things on the map if you unlock certain, like, the kind of vantage points, and then they'll show you where they are on the map. Or you can do it where basically it's not going to tell you where anything is. So you can set your exploration to, I want it to be easy, just tell me where everything is and I'll go there. Or if you want to be like, no, I want everything to be a mystery, don't tell me anything, you can set that as an option too. So that's kind of a cool little feature. I like that the options in this game do allow you to customize your experience. A lot of games would just do normal, easy, and hard, but this one having the, how do you want assassinations done? How do you want to have your exploration done? I think that's actually a really cool little feature. The upgrade system, the way you upgrade your armor and whatnot. So basically your armor has a number of upgrade slots. You can upgrade those in the wild, but you can actually upgrade the armor itself to another level at a blacksmith, which will open up new kind of the smaller upgrade things. So they have an interesting upgrade system. It's not super deep, but it is kind of interesting. The story is pretty standard so far. It's, if you played other Assassin's Creed games, you're going to get kind of the same kind of, oh, there's this really dramatic thing going on. It's a little bit melodramatic, but it's okay. The music's good, but I'm not going to remember any of it. I if you told me to hum one of the songs right now, I couldn't do that. But I do know that when I'm sailing around in the ship and I'm hearing this kind of little Viking tune in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm digging it. This is fine. So it's fine, but it's nothing to write home about. The sailing is interesting. I really liked Black Flag. I really loved the water, the naval combat. This obviously doesn't have that. Vikings didn't have cannons. Thank God for the rest of the world. Because if they did, that would be a horrible, horrible thing. But yeah, I haven't gotten into, I don't know if there's naval combat. I don't know if you can do boarding maneuvers or not. But sailing around is fairly good. And it's kind of interesting because it divides the world into islands as opposed to just one giant map. So that's kind of cool. And as in any Assassin's Creed, there are going to be some kind of real world sequences as of the framing device with the Animus. I haven't had any of those yet. So it's kind of interesting that they haven't really done that. I've heard the voices of the people that are supposedly controlling or reliving Ivor, but they haven't actually jumped into the real world yet. So if I was going to recommend this for people who would play this, I would recommend it for people that enjoyed The Witcher. I actually feel that this has, playing it, I'm getting more of a Witcher vibe than I'm getting a Ghost of Tsushima vibe, which I thought it was going to be like Ghost of Tsushima, but I'm actually getting more of a Witcher vibe to it based on the leveling and the way the combat kind of plays out and that sort of thing. So it's kind of a stealth Witcher game in a way, it feels. So I'd recommend it to people that enjoyed The Witcher, not necessarily for the story, but for just the kind of the gameplay and the fights and the monsters and that sort of thing. You're not fighting monsters here, but you get the idea. My one recommendation, though, would be do not play this game back-to-back with Ghost of Tsushima for a couple of different reasons. One, the controls are slightly different. Both of them actually have fairly intuitive controls, so that's not a real problem. However, if you are used to one, you're going to be hitting the wrong button I've had a couple times. Ghost of Tsushima, grabbing things was R2, and fighting was square and triangle. Here, grabbing things is triangle, and fighting is R1 and R2. So I'll run up to somebody and I'll be like, I'm going to talk to you. And I just slam my axe into their head.
Oh
So,
no.
yeah, they're usually fairly understanding about it. But it's definitely, so far, it's always been to like the NPCs that are friendly. I haven't walked up to a neutral NPC and accidentally attacked them, but I know it's going to happen eventually. So if you're used to the controls in one and you go to the other, you could definitely have a problem. I could see the same thing if you were in Ghost of Tsushima and you want to talk to somebody and you want to hit R2, but you hit triangle because that's how you talk to people uh, in Assassin's Creed, and then you just heavy attack somebody right in the head. So that could definitely be an issue there. Um, but mostly just because each one does things really, really well that the other one kind of does mediocre. And I think for me, going from Ghost of Tsushima and going to this, the combat just felt lackluster. Ghost of Tsushima's combat was amazing, and this one's serviceable. And so going to that is just kind of like, oh, come on. Also, the controls are really, really tight on Ghost of Tsushima, and this one they're kind of floaty. So sometimes I feel kind of frustrated trying to get around. I'm trying to kind of adapt to compensate for the controls in this. So for me, that's really, really hard. But I could definitely see going the other way, where if you played Assassin's Creed first and you can go anywhere you want, scale any wall, and then you go to Ghost of Tsushima and you're like, oh, I want to go over there. Oh, I can't. I have to find my way around. This is irritating. So I can see where something like that would be irritating. Also, things like you can recruit allies. You can do the sailing. There's a lot more exploration in this game. Uh, just because of that, I think if you went to Ghost of Tsushima, the world might feel a little not empty, but spread out. It might feel like you have long swaths of just riding your horse from point A to point B. Whereas in here, you're engaging a little more because you're like, oh, I'm going to ride my horse a little bit, and then I'm going to scale this mountain, and then I'm going to go across the mountaintops, and then I'm going to hop from tree to tree. So, there's a little more to do along the way as opposed to just sit on your horse and ride in a straight line. So I think I would highly recommend, if you did play one, you're probably going to like the other, but just don't play them back to back. Play one, play another game, then play the other one. That would be my recommendation. So
Okay. Just to put some context into this, Adam. I'm correct, right? You never played Origins and you never played Odyssey.
I never played Origins or Odyssey. I wanted to play Origins, but it just kind of kept getting pushed further and further and further back into the backlog. Um, Odyssey, I know a lot of people liked it. I never felt the drive to play it in the same way that I felt to play Origins. I think for me, it was just kind of like the Greek setting. I'm like, there's lots of Spartan kind of games out there. And so for me, having an Egyptian setting was just kind of like, oh, this is different. This is more appealing to me. So Origins kind of caught my eye a little more than Odyssey did. But I've heard good things. I've heard that Odyssey is probably actually a little bit better. So no, I haven't played those. I'd played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and I had played a little bit of Chronicles, but those are side scrollers. And I play a little bit of the original, not the original, of the Ezio. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. That collection,
Ezio
Assassin's Creed.
Auditore,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So I've played a little bit of that as well. So, but no, not Origins or Odyssey. Ooh, sorry.
No worries. No, no, I mean, it's an interesting perspective because I would say a lot of people have played Origins and Odyssey, and for you coming from the old style series to this new style series, which is supposed to follow on from Odyssey, it's quite an interesting perspective for a lot of people. Maybe they skipped Origins and Odyssey as well, and they should definitely take your review to heart.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I've heard a lot of people, a lot of the old school fans were kind of complaining about Origins and Odyssey, and they're like, "Oh, it's going more action oriented." Yeah, sure, you can do stealth, but it's not the same. It's not stealth oriented. Um, and I feel like Valhalla doesn't 100% answer that, but I feel like they do address it where, like I said, the assassinations, you can set your assassination how you want it. Um, I know in the old games you could do where you put on your cloak and you kind of walk with a crowd to blend in with the crowd. I've heard that you couldn't do that in either Odyssey or Origins. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was a complaint that I've heard people say. But that's definitely back. You can definitely do that as well. So it looks like they're trying to kind of. It's still definitely you can play it the same way you would play Odyssey or Origins. It's still definitely that game, but it looks like they're trying to add options for people that kind of want to play it in a more classical sense.
Okay. Um, I did have a second question, oh well, third question technically. In this game, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So I like you, I stopped after the Italian one with Ezio Auditore, and I haven't played one until Odyssey. Now in Odyssey, there was it was huge. I mean, I finished the game, and there was this cult that you had to kill, and you had to kill all the leaders of the cult. And when I finished the game, I still had 8 or 9 leaders to kill, and that was a good, Jesus, 50, 60 hours after playing it. I still hadn't technically killed all the people, bad people in this cult. Um, do you have a sense of how long this is gonna be?
I have no idea, honestly. I mean, I've been playing. I've checked my time last night. I've already put around 6 to 7 hours into the game. Um, but in that time, I've basically only visited story wise 2 or 3 locations. Most of that for me was I'm the kind of guy who likes to go off the beaten path, and I saw the little icon for the hawk or the eagle. In this case, I think it's a crow. But I saw those icons and I just beelined it for that to open up the map. So it's going to be big. As it is right now, I'm only in the first part of the game. And from what I know, people always talk about how you're exploring England and creating your own settlement. So basically, I'm in the prologue right now. And I've put 7 hours into the prologue. So there's a lot to unlock even there. And I mean, there's still areas that I haven't raided yet. There's still lots of treasures to go around. And I'm pretty sure that that is the bulk of the game is the England portion, not where I am right now. So it's going to be a while.
There is no like UI element like Odyssey had where you can sort of figure out, okay, there are 50 leaders. By the time I kill everybody, it's probably, 80, 90 hours.
Uh, Not yet. Maybe there will be later.
Okay.
Right now, basically the only thing I have on my on my map, or I have the towers, and I've unlocked all those in the main area in the starting area. And then when you unlock the towers, it puts down little icons, yellow ones for treasure, white ones for mysteries, blue ones for I don't remember what the blue ones are for, but they have these little icons and they're little dots on the map, and you can kind of go around and you can gauge how many of those are left. So, like for instance, I've already cleared out, say, the lowest part of the map. That part I've basically cleared out of all these things. So it does tell you how many things there are to unlock in an area. So in that sense, yeah, it'll say like, okay, on this map there are 25 mysteries. So in that sense, I am probably about a sixth or a fifth of the way of collecting all those treasures for this area. So, but again, a lot of that's traversal and getting from point A to point B. Now that I've unlocked more traversal options, I can travel faster. Like, I had to walk from one side of the map to the other to get to those towers. Now that I've unlocked those towers, I can just fast travel to them. So I would probably say if I really pushed it, I could probably collect all those in the first area in about 12 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm the kind of guy who gets distracted a lot too. I'm the guy who runs around and I see a seal and I'm like, ooh, a seal. Yay, I got a seal skin. Woohoo. What am I going to do with this? I have no idea. But I have it. Oh, look, a deer. Deer.
So
So,
our pitch for this week's episode is about time. So I'm going to talk about it when I talk about Godfall, but like, what is the time commitment to a particular session? Are you forced to play an hour or 30 minutes or 20 minutes before you can save, or what can you do in a gaming session for the different kinds of middle-aged gamers?
okay, so this is kind of interesting. Now you can save anytime you want. Okay, you can just go to the menu to save. It also has quick save options. All right, so you can do that. I do believe it has auto saving as well. I haven't noticed it because I always use my saving options. I would say if you're doing a story portion, each story section is probably going to run you maybe a half hour or so if you're doing all the dialogue and going through all that. It might run you, say, 45 minutes, depending on the length. Like if you're doing a raid and there's a boss at the end and you have all the dialogue at the beginning, all the dialogue at the end, I would say probably don't do story stuff unless you have around 45 minutes to complete them. However, if you only have, say, 15 minutes or 20 minutes and you just want to jump in, you can do the exploration thing. So that's kind of what I did last night. You know, my wife hopped into the shower and I knew that I wasn't going to have time to do any story. So I just explored the map and looked for those little nodes, and I unlocked maybe 4 or 5 things, gathering treasures and whatnot. So yeah, you can kind of gauge what you want to do based on how much time you have. So story's going to take longer, but exploration you can do in a much shorter time.
Okay. That's definitely good to hear. Any other last thoughts or comments? Like to fill our listeners,
uh
viewers in on?
Not really. I mean, I'm having fun with it. If you're an old school Assassin's Creed fan, I was talking to people online, on forums and stuff about it. I know a lot of people don't like the direction that Assassin's Creed is going. I think we need to gauge games based on what they are and not what their predecessors are. Because, for instance, I would say the same thing about Mass Effect Andromeda. If it wasn't called Mass Effect Andromeda, if it was just called Andromeda, it probably would have been seen as a really good game. But because it was Mass Effect, it came with baggage. I think that this is another case of that where because it's an Assassin's Creed game, it comes with baggage, and people will have certain, not expectations, but kind of nostalgic expectations that may not be met. So I would say, look at this as an action game with stealth elements. Don't say it's a bad Assassin's Creed game. Just play it as a game. I think you'd enjoy it a lot more.
I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Yeah. Just call it Valhalla and then just play Valhalla.
Okay, so that is our or Adam's take on Valhalla.
Yep, we
Adam
didn't go
will
too
not
long.
be streaming Valhalla this week because he is busy with live stuff. So please tune in next week as usual, Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, if you want to catch more of his endeavors with Valhalla.
Sorry about that.
No worries. And now we're going to be moving on to my game, Godfall. And here is my gameplay footage of this is a 4K medium settings gameplay footage of Godfall. Godfall released last week as well. It is developed by Counterplay Games, not Countertop Games, which I may say on social media or other stuff. I've talked about it before. It is published by Gearbox. Counterplay were the people who made the game Duelist, which I also talked about on another episode, so please have a look at that. It's interesting as well because it also has shift codes just like Borderlands. Shift codes, if you don't know, are codes that you can put into your game in Borderlands or now in Godfall that give you legendary gear. It was released on November 12th in Taiwan. It is for PC and PS5 only, maybe Xbox in 6 months, but that is a rumor. The story is a very typical story. Now, let me preface this by saying I am not a big story person, so I love these very simple stories. You're some kind of person. The way the game starts off, wearing armor, you fight somebody who you find out later on is your brother because he's gone mad with power and he wants to become a god. He kicks you off a really high place and you fall into the ocean. I've only played about probably 4 to 5 hours so far. I'm gonna try and copy Adam's format. The combat is fast, frenetic. It really feels like an action movie or like a kung fu movie or something you've seen before with swordplay and like sliding around and jumps and stylized dashes and slashes and overhead cuts. I was running this at HD when I was playing this in my first 2 hours. And at HD, it looked okay. I do have a 4K monitor, but I decided let me give it a try at 4K medium, and it actually runs really, really good at 4K medium. I might give it a try at 4K high details with everything on high, and hopefully my machine will be able to run it. For PC gamers, I have a Ryzen 3600, 16 gigabytes of 3200 DDR4 RAM, and an NVIDIA GTX 1080. And with medium, I played it yesterday for the first time. It ran great, no problems, no slowdowns. Voice acting is great. The voices are deep and they feel like famous voice actors that we've heard before in other games. Very appropriate for the story. I'm loving the way it's told, going back to the story. It just really works for me. You know, the typical idea of, oh my god, my brother betrayed me, I'm going to get revenge. Loot is good because this is an RPG just like Valhalla. You start to get loot towards the end of the first hour, and the amount of loot you get picks up from there. It's easy to get rid of the loot you don't want as well. You just go to your inventory, you right click salvage, hold it down for 3 seconds, and you're done. One of the things I really, really like is stats. As I've gotten older, and I'm sure many middle-aged gamers are like this, is that you don't want to look at complicated stats. It's very easy. When you click on your valor plate, you get to see, okay, this is how much damage I'm doing. Done. You don't need to look at anything else. But if you do want to, the options are there. There are three main stats. There's might, there's spirit, and vitality. That's it. The big thing as well is because I dislike controllers a lot. You get to play with the keyboard and mouse. It is a little bit complicated. I forgot a bunch of combinations because left click is for your light attack. Right click for your heavy attack. There are also different combos between left and right. You also have a shield which Q, and that also adds a combo. And your shield has different combinations where it's like Q and spacebar to launch a shield slam on the ground which stuns enemies. There's Q and E which makes you throw your shield in like a Captain America style where it goes around in a circle. But I mean, it's very doable for someone like me with like a somewhat slow reflexes these days. The things I don't like at the moment is the UI can be a little bit clunky. If you've watched my streams on Facebook, if you've seen our YouTube videos, there are loads of times I'm clicking on stuff and I'm trying to do stuff and I keep pressing escape to go back a menu and just exit out of the UI. And that is a little bit irritating. Lots of stuff was also not explained, so when you start off the game, you're collecting stuff, you're doing stuff, and you don't know where this stuff is in your UI, or you don't know what this stuff actually means. You sort of have to click and sort of figure out, oh, okay, this is what it means. It's optimized. I would say it runs decently well on my system. I have a mid to high range system. I don't have another computer to test it out on. I actually don't even know anyone else who does have it. But it runs pretty good on my system. Objectives as well. So you have main objectives and you get to know where those objectives are. But there are lots of other stuff in the world that sort of you have to explore to get it. It doesn't tell you how to get it. Like Adam said about Assassin's Creed, I wish they had an option in Godfall where it says, this is everything on the map, go and get it. Because that would save a lot of time. I really dislike wasting time running around a map. But it's great if you're a person who has time. Reviews are not great at the moment, and I blame players and the media. Again, this is just my opinion. This goes back to our easy mode. Check that out if you haven't done it. People want these complex, heavy story games with intricate plot lines. But this is just a simple, flashy fighting game. I mean, almost like a brawler in a sense. Who's it for? Anybody who likes fast-paced action games that are forgiving. Because one thing I was worried about this game is that you would die a lot, and I have not died in 5 hours. I've come close to dying, but I haven't died. So if you're interested in this game, definitely give it a go. It's an RPG, lots of cool action. It's very easygoing. It's also quite deep. I've checked out the system. It does indicate that your levels go all the way up to 50. I'm level 7 as of last night. I would say probably in an hour's session, you're probably going to gain 1 to 2 levels depending how many guys you're fighting, because you gain experience by fighting. You do not gain experience by smashing stuff, which is what you'll see me doing in a lot of videos, because you got to smash stuff to get crafting materials. I do stream this Monday, Thursdays, and Friday nights. I'm going to try and stream this tonight if I can finish editing our podcast in time. But we will see. Adam, what do you think?
So you said maybe Xbox in 6 months. Why maybe?
We did talk about that in a previous episode. It was a rumor that, for those of you who didn't listen to the previous episode, that the guys counter play games were supposed to get money from Sony and they never got all the money. And because Sony reneged on their agreement, they were saying that they're going to release it on Xbox, whereas opposed to it being exclusively a PlayStation game.
Okay. So
Uh, oh, I'm just going to
so
answer
so
a
they're
comment.
definitely gonna do it, or
No definite just yet.
okay.
So F and G, our subscriber to our YouTube channel, said, "Are the boss fights they good?" They are very good. FG, sorry if that's how you pronounce it. They are quite fast and fun. They are difficult because each boss has like a system that you sort of have to understand. I'm like, okay, how do you fight this guy? What are his habits? Not habits. What are his systems of attacking? I guess. There's probably a better way to say that. Um, and so you have to figure out, okay, I've fought three, four bosses so far. One guy had this huge hammer, and when he charges up for this big attack, you have to dodge it, and you have to know, okay, he hits swings 3 or 4 times in this attack, and he does this massive swing, and you have to get out of the range of that, otherwise you get knocked down and you lose a lot of health. Like most of the time in boss fights, if you get hit 3 times or 4 big hits, you're done, you're dead, and you have to restart. There are no save games like Valhalla, which I should make that out. You only get to save when you come back to your sort of sanctuary. Go ahead, Adam.
All right, that's interesting right there. So if you were to die, I mean, you haven't done it yet, so maybe you don't know. But if you were to die, does it reset progress, or does it more like a near automata or Dark Souls thing, where it sends you back to your main hub, but technically the game has continued. It doesn't reset to a previous save. Do you know?
Um, so I haven't died yet, as you said. My guess, from what I do know, is that you do go back to the sanctuary, and because the missions themselves, like you mentioned, the missions themselves, the story missions take about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So you do need that amount of time because there are guys to fight, and the fights are not. It's not very much not like a typical RPG where it's just sort of like click, click, click. There are guys, different kinds of enemies. You have to fight them a certain way. You'll see that in some clips. Let me forward the video a little bit because this last night's video I was exploring a little bit, and is it this part? Wait. These are the crabs. And there should be. I did actually get to do some fighting in this part of the game. Here we go. Okay, so if you look at where we are in the video right now, I throw my shield, the different kinds of enemies, and you can do like a takedown move, which is what I just did. And yeah, I for that guy's a healer, so he heals the enemy, so you have to take him out first. Now these guys all have an attack, and I'm about to get knocked down right there. And this guy feeds the rage into the other guy over there, and these guys also dodge and move back, and you have to sort of think about how do I fight these guys in a particular fashion. And guys respawn as well from all different angles sometimes, and it's super irritating, but it's also kind of fun at the same time. And I love just so that we do the sliding dodge right there.
Okay, so they support each other.
They do. So this is
Yeah, you don't see that in a lot of games.
not just a simple sort of click and slash game. You actually have to think, otherwise you do get your health knocked down. You have
Okay.
something that recharges your health 3 times, and that's it. And if that's out, the next time you take a life-killing hit, you're done.
Oh wow. So they have different kind of. I originally thought that all the weapons were kind of locked into the what do they call them? The valor
Velo
plates.
plates.
I originally thought that, but you have weapon options, right? You can actually equip any weapon to any valor plate.
Correct. What I did find out yesterday is that when you equip a particular weapon to a particular Valor plate, that weapon is locked to the Valor plate. So I made the mistake of trying out a new Valor plate because in the progress of the game, they force you to craft one of the Valor plates, which is like this fire, looks like a lady Valor plate, who knows. Um, and when I crafted this Vela plate, I gave her some weapons and I played with her for about 2 hours, and her weapons are locked to her, and I cannot use them when I switched back to the original Vela plate.
Oh, so anytime you equip a weapon, it's kind of like, I guess, soul linked or whatever would be the MMO term, where once one person equips it, nobody else can use it.
Exactly. So I was kind of
Okay.
like, oh no, that sucks, because I had some good dual blades on my other Vela plate that I wanted this guy to use, but unfortunately not. So please learn from my experience. You got to be careful what weapons you equip on your Vela plates. I will add another thing. I mean, within 7 hours, I've got the ability to craft a third Vela plate as well. And all the Vela plates have different stats and different ultimate powers as well.
So would you say Warframe is a good comparison, given that you're equipping these different kind of suits, but everybody can kind of use every weapon? And
Yes, yes. I was like when I was playing some like this is very much like Warframe, except without the endless smashing of stuff for crafting components. It's definitely simplified as well. Like one of the things if our listeners don't know, I played Warframe back when there were only 500 people playing in early access on PC. I've played it for more than 1,000 hours. This is very much like the old Warframe, far simpler in terms of crafting, far simpler in the way you acquire your armor sets, far simpler in the way the armor sets work, and the mods. And so there are no, well, there are mods in this game, but it reminds me of a simpler Warframe, something that actually appeals to me more than the current Warframe does. Warframe's got so much content now, so many layers of complexity, and I think this is to me a breath of fresh air. But this does look better than Warframe. I played Warframe in 4K. This is by far the flashier game, and that's just because I mean it uses modern technology as opposed to Warframe is using the Digital Extremes engine, which is not a new engine.
so is this a live service game, or is this basically once you beat it, you think it's going to be pretty much done?
I think once you beat it, it's gonna be done. But I mean, there's you need to collect Valor plates. There are augments. Each individual Valor plate has its own series of augments. Augments are sort of like additional bonuses you can get. So once you beat the story, there's gonna be enemies you can farm. The idea, and other people have said it, the idea of min-maxing your build is definitely gonna be in the game. I can see people sort of experimenting with bulls, experimenting with augments to create the most powerful version. I'd imagine they're going to do lots and lots of in-game content. But I mean, the way it's progressing, I think it's going to be at least 30 to 40 hours until you hit level 50. And then after that, you're still going to want to unlock all the augments for all the Valor plates.
Okay, but like in Warframe, they're obviously always adding new worlds, new areas. This is the end of Warframe is way off in the future that we can't even see it. Do you think that they're going to be adding content consistently for this in the same sense?
They did say they were going to add more Valor plates. I hope they're going to add new areas. New areas would be wonderful because the map does look fairly expensive, but I was into multiplayer in in-game like Warframe Destiny. Oh, that's a good question. Doc Wayne asked a question. He said, "Are you eventually forced into multiplayer in the end game?" I think not. Like I've been playing this solo. This game does have multiplayer, and I was a bit worried about that, like Warframe, that you have to play multiplayer in the end game. Doc Wayne, I did do that in Warframe, and I hated that. From what I've experienced so far, you don't need to play this multiplayer. The mobs or combat encounters are perfectly doable. Single player, the bosses themselves are just this boss. You're not fighting this boss and his minions. There's one boss that did have that, but that was the only one. So I don't imagine this is gonna get this way, but I'm gonna be keep on playing this and see. Hopefully it's not, because if it does do that, I'd be kind of disappointed, but I'd still want to play this game.
Okay. What about customization options?
Lots and lots of customization options. I haven't figured out. There are cosmetics for the Val plates. I was gonna say there wasn't, but there are cosmetics. The weapons themselves have cosmetics as well. So I can imagine at some point that they're going to release. What are they going to release? I just lost my train of thought over there. They're going to release,
Cosmetics.
yeah, paid for cosmetics because I mean that's a good way to make money. I'd pay money for cosmetics, like a
That's the world
flashy
we live
suit
in.
of lion armor. Yeah,
Fleshy suit of lion. Ooh.
yeah, no, because I mean, I love the lion armor. It just makes me feel strong.
Oh, did you say flashy?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you said fleshy. I was,
Oh
I
no,
was
no,
like,
no,
oh no,
no,
God.
no, flashy suit of lion armor. I have no idea what we look like underneath this armor. Um, so
Just
it's
souls, I guess.
maybe. Yeah.
It does kind of look like an afterlife Valhalla, not in the game, but kind of an afterlife kind of thing, all spirity and whatnot. So it is multiplayer. Do you know how many people you can have playing simultaneously, and is it crossplay?
Up to 4 people, and it is not crossplay.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, could you, in theory, have two people with the same Valor plate, or do you have to have separate Valor plates?
That part I do not know, again, because I will not be playing this with anyone. I don't know anyone who's bought it. Our friend Hans is going to buy it, and we're gonna play it on PC once we finish Trine 4. We're like 2 levels away, so that point I'll be able to know how things work out in multiplayer, and I'll probably be doing a YouTube and Facebook video on that, probably in 2 weeks.
It'll be interesting to see how level discrepancy works too. Like if one player is a much higher level, how's that going to balance?
Exactly,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and then the only other question I have is you mentioned you're going around, you're leveling, but at the same time you're crafting things. How is the balance between leveling and crafting? Like, is leveling more important, or is crafting better gear more important? How does crafting kind of augment your level?
I will mention that because I just hit crafting yesterday. You do a mission where you have to rescue this quote unquote blacksmith. There's another name for that, but he's a blacksmith. And he helps you upgrade your weapons. And yeah, pretty much he does upgrades, and you get to enchant basic weapons and improve their level. You get to craft valor plates, yes, but I was kind of hoping you'd craft weapons because is there some weapons I found that I really like. Some of the heavy weapons, the fighting style is a bit hard for me to figure out. So I prefer the longsword, which is what you see me using right now. I like the dual blades. I've tried a pole arm. I've tried the hammers. They don't really quite jive for me. So I'm hoping. I have a feeling that you cannot craft weapons, but I could be wrong. So I'll update us on when we'll probably do an update probably in a month's time once you and I have both had more time to play this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember way back in the day with like say the original Monster Hunter back on PS2. But some of the heavy weapons were not very viable in solo just because they're too slow and you're going to get mopped. But then they were super powerful when you had other people around because you could just really you didn't have to worry about little things jumping on and interrupting you all the time. So maybe Hammer might be more viable for a group play as opposed to a solo play.
True, true, true.
But, all right, well that covers all my questions.
Great. So that is the end of Godfall. Okay, check us out at Middle Age Gaming 2020 on Twitch, Middle Age Gaming on Instagram, Gaming Age on Twitter, Middle Age Gaming 2020 on Facebook, and of course, just email us directly at middleagegaming2020@gmail.com.
That's right. We're still waiting for emails. Thankfully, we finally got some comments today. Very happy about that, but still waiting on those emails. So please feel free to contact us and follow us at any of those places. And we will see you soon.
Definitely, we will definitely do that. Have a good week and stay tuned. We will be talking about Chinese games and the Chinese gaming era in our after show, as well as some interesting news items. Okay, goodbye.